So Speaker Kevin McCarthy did an interview with CNBC about the debt limit, and as is typical for Republicans, almost every word he said was a lie. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So Speaker Kevin McCarthy was on CNBC spinning like crazy trying to defend the Republican position on the debt limit. Frankly, it's a position for which there is no defense in my opinion. It's an outrageous abuse of process, especially after they voted 3 times to increase the debt limit under Donald Trump with nary a word about saving money. Oh yes, the Republicans only become concerned about fiscal responsibility when a Democrat's in the White House. Isn't that funny? So instead of trying to make his case, Kevin McCarthy literally sat there lying for 6 minutes. Let's check out the video here.
Speaker, one of the things that Kim Jeffries was talking about was taxes and where taxes are going to fit into all of this. You've called, I believe, for extending the tax cuts that were put in place under President Trump. You've probably seen the CBO say that costs the taxpayers effectively $3.5 trillion in terms of adding to the debt. How does that dynamic work in this context?
Well, thanks for the question. First of all, there is not going to be a tax discussion in this debt ceiling. The president admitted that yesterday at the beginning.
Okay, let's be clear about something. The reason the president admitted that there's not going to be a tax discussion is because the Republicans made it clear they will vote for no tax increase under any circumstances. So much for being willing to negotiate. Secondly, just watch the way he avoids this question. He doesn't want to talk about the fact that he's really not a fiscal conservative, that this is just a political game that he's playing, potentially risking the future of the American economy. Let's watch him try to weasel out of this.
But let's literally talk about this, because this is a good topic you brought up. You know, if you look at the 50-year average of how much money government brings in, we usually bring in about 17% of GDP. Right now, we're almost at 20% of GDP bringing in. So what you find is only 2 other times in modern history have we ever been at this point, in 1944 and the year 2000. So you're actually not even you're bringing in more than any other time. So the real problem is what we are spending. Normally, on a 50-year average, we spend about 21% of GDP. We're now over 23.6, on our way to 25%. So
okay, let's just pause there. Now, I looked for the statistics that Kevin McCarthy was citing, and this is what I was able to find from the Federal Reserve. And you can see, looking at this graph, right here is 1940. Here's World War II, the spending for World War II, and then it dropped after World War II. And then you had basically the sustained period where the percentage of revenue to GDP is pretty stable. It goes up, it goes down. It was higher than now in the late 90s. It was just about as high as now during the Trump administration. And so you can see this characterization that he has of, oh, we're way bringing in more revenues than we used to, just isn't consistent with the story. And what's more is you have to ask yourself, well, what changed since World War II? Well, that would be things like Social Security and Medicare, things that people care about. So are we bringing in more revenue now than we were before World War II? Yes, we are. Of course we are. But Americans are also getting more in exchange. Let's keep watching.
The problem is the spending level. And it's not just that the taxes are bringing in more money than anybody projected. The economy became stronger. We became more competitive. Companies came back to America instead of going to other countries.
Okay, more BS here. And I love when these Republicans try to justify the Trump tax cuts, because guess what? They have been a complete failure. There were all these predictions that they'd bring in all kinds of additional revenue and they'd bring companies back to America and increase jobs and increase employees' revenue. None of that came to pass. In fact, according to just about every analyst, the Trump tax cuts have been a massive failure. They've done nothing more than boost corporate revenues and be a big tax giveaway to the very wealthy. And how have those higher profits been spent? Not on building the business more, but on buying back stock, essentially giving money directly to the shareholders, to the owners, at the cost of the workers. So spare me the talk about the great things that the Trump tax cut has done for our economy. Let's keep watching.
But what you really want to look at is what the Democrats passed last time. They called the Inflation Reduction. That's costing more than 3 times what they projected it would cost. We're watching the president claim that he cut the deficit by $1.7 trillion. He didn't do anything. 3 programs ended from COVID. He actually increased the deficit by more than $500 billion of what he said it would be. So if you want to be apples to apples, it's very simple. We are spending more money by a 50-year average than we actually bring in. For 21 straight years, we spent more than we brought in. No household would live this way, and no business or CEO that you interview every single day would continue this pattern. And that.
Okay, let's be clear about something. The last president, by the way, who enjoyed a budget surplus, that would be Bill Clinton, the Democrat. And the last president to substantially lower the deficit, before Biden, of course, that would be Barack Obama. When you look at the statistics here, it's very clear that when Democrats are in our office, the deficit goes down. When Republicans are in office, the deficit goes up. And just look at this huge increase in the deficit here. Guess who is in office then? That would be Donald Trump. And what's more is what Kevin McCarthy's not telling you is a big part of how Joe Biden's saying that he's able to reduce the deficit is by including tax increases on the very wealthy in his budget plan. Tax increases that Republicans are desperate to protect the very rich from. And in fact, as Kevin McCarthy tried to dodge the question earlier, they want to lower their taxes. But let's keep watching.
That's all we're saying. Let's curve what we are spending less than we spent last year. Let's go back 5 months. Let's put in things that make us grow, right? Permitting reform. Cut the red tape. If you like renewable energy, be able to get the permit to do it. Build the roads. But also the other energy we talked about. Let's help people get jobs again. Let's be less dependent upon China. I think that's reasonable and sensible. But I didn't think it was reasonable that I had to wait 104 days till they finally admit they'd come into the room and negotiate.
Now, that's the subject for another video, which I will address, where I think Joe Biden should not have come into the room to negotiate. But we'll talk about that in a different video. Let's keep watching.
To the extent there are Democrats watching you right now, and to the extent you would want to talk to them if this is going to be a bipartisan deal, what do you say to the viewer who says, look, during the Trump administration, while you were in office, you did not push back on increasing the debt and the deficit?
Well, I would tell you one thing. If you're talking about a debt ceiling negotiation, that's not true. President Trump negotiated with Nancy Pelosi. The difference was...
That's BS. There was never a need for Donald Trump to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi because of the fact that Nancy Pelosi was never going to throw the economy under the bus for some simple political game, just the way that Kevin McCarthy and his Republican cronies are trying to do. The Democrats passed clean debt limit increases 3 times during the Trump administration because of the fact that we believe in not hurting the American people and the American economy simply to gain political points. Let's keep watching.
She argued to spend more money. We pushed back, and I think there's enough blame to go around with.
That's BS. She did not do that during the debt limit negotiations. She did that during the budget negotiations. And in fact, it wasn't that she said she wanted to spend more. She wanted to spend more in different places than where Donald Trump wanted to spend it. Remember the border wall? Nancy Pelosi said he was never going to get 1 penny for that. And she held firm on it. Because, of course, Donald Trump promised that Mexico would pay for that, right? Oh, but that's a story for another video. Let's keep watching.
Republicans and Democrats, they all spent too much in the last 21 years. But you know what? There comes a moment in time when you hit the wall. We're now at a debt that we have as larger than an economy, more than 20%. We haven't seen this since World War II. And you can't continue down this trajectory if you want to continue to be the strongest nation in the world. You know, when you talk to the Defense Department, Not this year, but years ago. They tell you the greatest threat to America is not Russia or China, it's the size of our debt. And
okay, again, I looked for the information that Kevin McCarthy's citing and found some very different information, that the biggest threat to America is climate change, as well as China and Russia. Nowhere does he mention the national debt. We'll get to that later on, but let's keep watching for now.
this is a real concern. So I haven't sat down and said it has to be one way or no way. I simply asked the president, can we have a negotiation?
He has said it can be his way or no way. When it comes to taxes, they have said they would not support any tax increase of any kind in any way, shape, or form. That's not negotiating. Let's keep watching.
About it. Can we negotiate? Can we talk about it? You bring up your ideas, I'll bring up mine, and let's let the best idea at the end of the day win.
And isn't it funny, by the way, President Biden actually proposed a budget that dramatically reduced the budget deficit and included more taxes on the very wealthy, which is exactly what Republicans are most afraid of. Let's keep watching.
I think whether you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican, you have this debate in your own household. So why can't we have this debate with the taxpayers' money as well?
Okay, now let's clarify something here. The debate that we're talking about is not whether the federal government should spend this money or should not spend this money. The debate we're talking about here is whether the federal government should pay its bills. For example, if we were to debate over the budget the way Nancy Pelosi did with Trump, that would be debating how much money we're going to spend one month or the next month, and what our priorities are going to be for how we'll spend our income. What they're talking about here instead is whether we will stop payment on checks we've already written. That's not a debate that any household has. And that's what essentially the Republicans are threatening to do. Let's keep watching.
Mr. Speaker, I also see, and both sides have completely different memories about previous debt ceiling negotiations and whether there were negotiations, whether there's a clean debt bill or not. But one thing that keeps coming back to me is it's been posited that there has never been this type of brinkmanship or leverage, that the Democrats have never said we will not raise the debt ceiling if you don't do what we want to do. This is unprecedented. It's never been done before, and it would set a bad precedent. Is that true? Number one, it's never been done. And do you worry that the next time the shoe's on the other foot, that the Democrats will say, hey, we're able to do this. You did it in 2023.
Okay, now, number one, watch how Kevin McCarthy tries to weasel out of this question. He refuses to answer it because the questioner is absolutely right. The Democrats have never done this. And what's more is I'll answer the second part of his question, which is that Republicans don't worry about that because Democrats actually care about the country. We don't want to destroy the economy to make some political points. We always pass debt ceiling increases because of the fact that we know the federal government has to pay its bills. We don't play the kind of games that Kevin McCarthy is playing with our future here. And it's worth noting that the last time this was an issue, back in 2013, was again when the Republicans did it to Barack Obama. But let's keep watching.
No, we've watched all the times before. Some of the best legislation we've got where we can curb spending came with the debt ceiling negotiations. You can sit back and you could watch the comments Schumer made or Nancy Pelosi made. Both sides of the aisle have talked about this. But we have divided government. And, you know, the founders has devised our government where the House passes the bill, the Senate passes the bill, and you go to conference. Unfortunately, in this situation, only the House has passed the bill. So there's no conference to go to. But when you have a president that simply says, I will not negotiate with you, you have to have a clean debt ceiling, or there's no way we can go forward. That's not what the American people asked for.
Okay, now let's clarify something here. Both houses of Congress passed the budget and passed the spending bills and passed the legislation that current spending is based on. All the debt ceiling is about is whether we're actually going to pay the bill. President Biden has said he's happy to negotiate with Republicans over the budget, but the debt ceiling is not something to be trifled with. And when Speaker McCarthy says that, the two chambers pass their separate bills and then negotiate, The thing he's forgetting is we already have legislation that passed. Both chambers, signed by the president, both Republican and Democratic presidents, that incurred this debt. And so he's using his position as the Republican leader with the tiniest of majorities in the House to stop payment on the checks that have been written by full Congresses and administrations, both Republicans and Democrats in the past. That's the point that Joe Biden is making, which is if you want to negotiate about how government spending is going to be done, let's do it when it comes to the budget. Doing it over the debt ceiling is not the place to do it. Let's keep watching.
Not the way our government is designed. Look, I believe just in business every day, different opinions can get together, come to an agreement where both sides feel they win. I've been asking for that from day one. Let's get into the room, let's have negotiations, and let's walk out where the American people win. Let's limit our ability to continue to spend crazily in the future years. Let's save money that has been wasted, and let's grow our economy and make us stronger again. I don't think it's that difficult.
So I would say that Joe Biden would agree with that. In fact, he's been well recognized as being a good negotiator and somebody who's able to get deals done across the aisle. I mean, he was able to get gun control legislation passed, for God's sakes. But this is not something to be trifled with. This is simply saying, are we going to pay our bills? Again, it's like sending out a bunch of checks and then calling the bank to say to stop payment on all of them. How much credit do you think your vendors are going to give you if you stop payment on the checks you send them? That's the problem, because if you believe that your vendors would not give you credit if you stop payment on the checks you sent them, just imagine how the vendors to the U.S. government will feel when the U.S. government does that. Well, if you want to see another video where I talk about just how weak a hand the Republicans have on the debt ceiling negotiations, check out this video over here. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.